Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another AAA Car Conversations with. My name's John Paul, AAA's car doctor, and I'm here to try to help you with some maybe questions you have about different kinds of things. And joining us today is Greg Bibbo. He is the Director of Sales and Marketing for Sylvania Orstrom, and interestingly, located just a little bit north of where I am, up in New Hampshire. Uh, Greg, thanks for joining us on AAA Car Conversations.
My pleasure to be here.
Well, we did some studies years back, and I don't think it's changed a whole heck of a lot. That we found that about one out of four cars on the road either had a bulb that was out or headlights that were misaligned. And I'm willing to bet that probably hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot.
It's funny you say that because my boss, he's got a finance background, and a lot of times on the road he'll be counting how many burnouts he sees coming at him, and it's like a little de facto metric that he uses to see what the demand might be for. It's almost like our version of the Farmer's Almanac. But you're right. You know there's a lot of safety systems on a vehicle, and people can see when their tires are wearing out. Their mechanic tells them when their brakes are wearing out. You know when your wipers are wearing out, but you don't really get a regular report card of whether your bulbs are almost ready to burn out. And 80% of the people wait until they burn out to actually do something.
Well, and that's a really good point because I think, maybe the typical life of a headlight bulb from first on to off maybe 5 years, but the quality life of the bulb is much shorter than that, right?
Absolutely. And that, if 80% of people wait until they burn out, then those last few months of driving, to your point, 5 to 7 years is typical for an OEM bulb. And in those last months, they don't realize they've lost about 50 feet of visibility. And you say, okay, well, what's 50 feet? Rough numbers, the trailer part of a standard size tractor trailer is about 53 feet. So it's not an insignificant amount of distance. And it's you can't react to what you can't see. And at night, your headlights are your radar screen. So that really does translate into a lot of reaction time.
Yeah, it really does, and I don't think a lot of people realize the other part of it is too, between the time we're 20 and the time we're 60, we need 3 times as much light to see. So it's so important to be able to get the right amount of light on the road and light that's
Right.
gonna be helpful and not light that's gonna be kind of a problem with other motorists. And we'll get to that in just a little bit.
Sure.
But you guys have a campaign, I guess, called the Headlight Savings Campaign. Can you tell us what that is?
We do. Yeah, we coined it headlight savings time, kind of mirroring off of daylight savings time, because you know when you turn your clocks back from then until the time you turn them forward again in March is the darkest time of the year. And really, as we're sitting here in December, you're going to have the shortest day of the year coming up in a couple weeks now. But it's when 2/3 of your burn time is on your lights. It's when you're relying on them the most. And so the campaign is just to increase awareness for people that your lights are active safety equipment, just like a lot of other systems on your vehicle. And if you can't remember the last time you've replaced them, now might be a good time to do it before they burn out in the middle of a nor'easter, when you've got a 3-hour drive ahead of you and you really could use two fresh set of headlights.
And it's not just the headlights either. It's sometimes the lenses. We did some studies that showed that really clouded up headlight lenses can block 90% of the light coming from a good bulb.
Yeah, not only are they blocking it, but then they're scattering it too. So you lose, when that hazing happens to your lenses, you lose some of the prescription, especially on the low beam. And you're right on that. You can have a great fresh bulb, but if it's trying to project through a hazy lens, you're missing a lot of that fresh opportunity.
And a lot of people don't realize too that at speeds above 45 miles an hour, a lot of cars, the low beams are almost ineffective. You're driving over your light at that point, and that's where people need to realize that you need good lights, but also, be aware your car has high beams and use them.
Absolutely. Yeah, you use the high beams when you can, and your point's right. If you, especially if you have an older vehicle and you've gone years, you're like, I can't remember last time. Did I ever replace my lights on this vehicle? Then yeah, at highway speeds, you probably are overdriving your headlights because
Right.
your radar screen only goes so far. By the time something's there and detectable, if you're not immediately on the brakes, you probably don't have enough stopping distance to avoid it.
Yeah, and the other part that people kind of forget about when, I used to be an auto mechanic, and back then, I'm not as old as dirt, but I'm pretty old. And way back when, if you talk to people with antique cars, they'll tell you that they were, gas lamps, and you had to polish the lenses or polish the reflectors so you get good light. I'm more of the seal beam person. So,
Where you had to
cars from
aim
the
them.
yeah, cars from the at least the 60s and 70s had seal beam headlights, and when you replace them, you essentially replace the lens at the same time.
Absolutely.
Today, we're replacing bulbs, and the technology has changed a lot from seal beams to halogens to HIDs to
Yeah.
yeah, so a variety of different lighting. And a lot of times people are going, well, I like the old lights. Well, because they didn't put a lot of light on the road, and, they weren't, they didn't act like a problem. But on the other hand, there are different things you can do to change the lighting in your car and get better lights. But there's also, you can change your lights and get worse lights too, right?
You can. I mean, the point you noted about aiming, with a sealed beam, you're right. You're popping the whole reflector out. Basically, the reflector and the light source were one unit. Now, it's an interchangeable light source, whether it's a halogen or an HID, and you're putting that into the reflector. There's less of a need to re-aim it, but there is the capability on today's reflectors of having an XY adjuster
Yep.
so that a mechanic or a consumer could comfortably re-aim if they needed to. But by and large, there's a lot more, to your point, more power, more brightness and power available in the newer technologies. So a brand new halogen, or even some of the aftermarket halogens, where they won't last as long, but they're significantly whiter and brighter, but they're going to be good for the consumer driving, but they're not going to create any negative glare effects to oncoming drivers. Where we get the biggest problem, I think, on the road today, John, is oncoming driver glare, because a person either inadvertently put the wrong technology in because they bought something online that wasn't legal, or they know that concept and they put it into a reflector not designed for it. And what happens there is now you've got a reflector that's designed around technology A. You put technology B in it, it doesn't quite couple the same way, and the result is lack of focus and oncoming driver glare. And it really doesn't take much of an error at the bulb level to translate into a huge amount of glare coming at you on the highway.
And it's one of the lighting terms I learned years ago was dazzle. I didn't even really knew what that mean, but it's that light just sort of disperses all over the place, and you get this sort of really uneven light that isn't, like you said, isn't focused, isn't aimed. Even though you kind of took out a bulb and put in a bulb, you would think, well, the other one was good. Why isn't this one? Because, like you said, the technology doesn't match the
Yeah.
original part. And you look at some of these lights, and you go to whether you buy online or you go to an auto parts store, and you pick up the package, and it may say DOT legal, but on the back of it, it may say not for on-road use.
True. And I'd say in a branded manufacturer in a national chain of auto parts stores is probably your most reliable place to buy precision parts.
Yeah.
In the precision on a light is no different than, I mean, where you have a mechanic's background, you're doing suspension and alignments to thousandths of an inch. You're super sensitive on high speed wheel balancing. What we're talking about here is also, 10 thousandths of an inch, one way or the other, can make a difference. And bulbs, low beams, high beams, are federally regulated products. They are supposed to be DOT approved, and unless you have the approval, you're not supposed to be putting DOT on the product or on the packaging. But to your point, even online, if you type in headlight bulb on your favorite place to buy product, you would see many brands you might not recognize that are selling a lot of product that says, DOT approved 10,000 lumens. The original bulb only has 1,200 lumens. It's not, those claims they're confusing to customers, because if someone sees that and then they see 4.7 stars and 3,000 reviews, we think that's a good purchase.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess people need to be aware that, just because it's online and it says something, it isn't true. I'm sure if I look around my house somewhere, I have a watch that says Rolex, but I paid $20 for it. So
Yeah.
it is not a real Rolex, even though it says that.
No, I
So
mean, we're talking safety equipment too. So it's like, there's so much precision on a vehicle. It's the most dangerous thing we do every day as people, is get behind the wheel of a vehicle. And you wouldn't think of cutting a corner on a tire. You wouldn't on brakes. You rely on precision, high quality parts from someone you can trust to make those decisions. And lighting's no different. If you have a question, your local shop is probably, your local auto parts shop is probably one of the better places.
well, let's talk about kind of regular replacements that you guys sell. You sell, we'll just take an average car that has an average halogen bulb in it. But you guys have the stock bulb. You have something that's a little bit brighter and whiter,
Yes,
a little bit brighter and whiter than that. And what you folks told me years ago was, the better bulbs that are brighter and whiter are like high performance tires. High
absolutely.
performance tires don't last as long as a regular tire does, but you get better performance out of it, and better, whiter, brighter bulbs that are made properly. There's a trade-off in somewhat in life, right?
Absolutely. You said it perfectly, in that the bulb that would be labeled basic, a Sylvania basic bulb, is most often the original equipment bulb that came on the vehicle in the first place. We supply both the new car market and the replacement market. But for the new car market, oftentimes the bulb is optimized for life as much as it's optimized for performance, because it's really intended to get through a warranty period in a reliable way. When you walk into an auto parts store, you'll see 4 levels of performance above that are at increasing levels of brightness and whiteness, so that a person can make a choice. If safety on the road, if not over driving your headlights on the highway, is super important. If you drive a lot of rural driving, a higher performance bulb like a Silver Star Ultra would be their best combination of down road performance and being able to see low contrast items like a deer on the side of the road. But that bulb is going to be markedly lower life than the original bulb that came on the car. And so it's a variety of choices for different price points and what people want out of a product in terms of longevity and performance.
Yeah, and the other part of it is we're seeing, and you mentioned it, illegal LED low beam replacement bulbs, and that's something you see a lot online.
Yeah.
And in some cases, I got a couple of emails from people over the past few months. They put those bulbs in, and all of a sudden now they have a headlight warning lamp coming on their dash, because
Yeah.
the headlight system is tied into the car's computer, and it knows that something is wrong. Then they come out with kits to try to remedy that, to try to put the lights off. And then you find, oh, I'm going to put all of this in, and now my daytime running lights don't work anymore because they're tied into the same system. So, there's, I guess it's part of, sometimes you want to try to do something better, but in the same time, you're making things worse.
True. I mean, and as consumers, there's so many LED options everywhere else in our life. You can upgrade any socket in your house. You can, all the Christmas lights now are often LED. Flashlights are LED. So, the technology is well known to people. So it sounds like an easy connection. Well, all right, well, I'll just upgrade what's in my car. But you're right. I mean, the sophistication on a vehicle now, it's sensing everything. And an LED is going to interact with that system different, uses different voltage, it operates in a different way. It's DC versus AC. So depending on the nature of the vehicle, you can get all kinds of warning lights. And even if you don't, if you put it in there and you like what you see as the driver, more often than not, it's at the expense of the oncoming person coming at you, because you're going to spray more glare into their eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the things that when I think HIDs first came out and
Yeah.
as a factory bulb, and you talk to people, and there was one person I worked with, and he said, these lights are horrible, they're terrible, they're
Yeah.
blinding.
No, I remember that.
And then one day when he showed up at work, he was driving his wife's car, and I said to him, that's got the lights that you don't like. And he said, yeah, until I started to drive the car.
Yeah.
And and then I found out how much I really liked them. And again, but those were factory installed lights. And
Yeah.
I think the difference, and again, because maybe I've been around a little bit, I remember when halogens were first introduced and people didn't like them because they looked different. And people would stare at them and they look back, and glare recovery takes a lot longer as you age. And the same thing with HIDs. I always felt that HID lights, if everybody had them, nobody would complain about them because they would all look the same.
No, you're right. And when you reference aging and what your eyes do, one other piece of it, you do have a hard time seeing, but your eye is also a lot more sensitive to blue or white light.
Right.
And because it is different, people are like, when HIDs were coming online, people would look at them because they're different in a sea of cars coming at you. Well, wait a minute, why is that one a little different color? You look at it, it's a more powerful product too.
Right.
So for that little moment, you blind yourself, but you think it's the problem. Meanwhile, you kind of drew attention to it, but
Yeah.
it was a well-focused product. And this is where brand new LED is the same kind of thing, that it very well focused, excellent product. That isn't what's giving the glare on the road to people. It's the illegal conversions that are the problem. I mean, we have products available that could successfully be put in a low beam reflector safely, but we're in the process of discussing with the government changing the regulations so that those could be safely sold. But until they are, there's a lot of online choices that can be made, and unfortunately, we've been kind of conditioned to think that if it's got 2,000 reviews at 4 point whatever stars, that just means something's good.
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. So as a consumer, what can people do? What do you suggest besides just kind of keeping a conscious kind of tab of how old my headlights are, or how old, when was the last time I replaced them, or how old my car is. But what can people do? And when it's time for headlight replacement, what should people do?
Okay. The unfortunate thing about bulbs is that there really is no good layman's way of assessing how much life you have. There's the quarter trick
Yeah.
of putting that into your tire depth. There's a lot of different things you can assess wear on. Unfortunately, lights aren't one of them. So, I'd say, how long have I had this vehicle? Am I the original owner? Have I had it for multiple years? If you're an average to high mileage driver and you haven't touched those lights in 2 years, have you lost 50 feet? Maybe not, but you've certainly lost some.
Yeah.
And now you could say, well, okay, do I drove a lot of nighttime driving at highway speeds? Well, gee, I almost ran into a deer the other day. It's have that kind of conversation with yourself, and because it is more of a subjective decision. From there, how to do it, we have lots of information on our website. Google Sylvania Automotive, you'll see a link to our webpage. We have lots of information there, and you could start there. You could go onto various things like maybe YouTube and ask the question, okay, my make and model, how do I install it? That can give you an idea if you are a DIYer. If you're not as inclined to do these things yourself, I would go to your auto parts store, and oftentimes either the counter person will guide you, or sometimes if they're not busy, they'll change the bulbs for you.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of online research or great one-on-one advice you can have with someone to feel comfortable with the decision-making process.
And you mentioned YouTube. There's a YouTube video of you and one of your coworkers, which is kind of funny too. So
Oh yeah, you came to this interview as well prepared as me, and that yeah, that was I think I had more hair back then and probably a little less gray in the
yeah,
goatee.
yeah. And whoever the announcer was called you a pretty bright guy, which for a headlight company, I guess. Yeah,
Uh,
or a
there's
lighting
lots of puns in
manufacturer.
the lighting world.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, that's one of the things that, we look at, kind of, as part of your campaign, and you mentioned, go to Sylvania or automotive, you can learn a lot of things about lighting. Um, Not to take that same bad pun, but the future of lighting in the automotive world looks pretty bright, right?
Absolutely.
Um, I saw some headlights with Audi that would turn on and off segments of the light to prevent
Oh, sure.
blinding of other drivers. Mercedes has a similar system, but there's some kind of government block. I don't want to call it a blockade, but the headlight laws haven't been changed in a long time. But I guess we're looking at changing some of those laws now that are going to allow more active headlight use, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, the amount of technology on a vehicle today is unbelievable. The technology, the sensors for adaptive cruise control, lane departure, um, uh, blind spot detection, and like you're saying, and there's so many different versions of adaptive lighting available that yeah, and oftentimes it is hard for the regulatory process to
Yeah.
keep pace with it. I have a 2020 Volkswagen GTI that has LED low and high beams, but they're also on a servo. So as I turn my wheel, they will turn as well.
Yeah.
And just something simple like that. It's amazing how much better you see. So I think, to your point, as the years progress, I think there will always be a queue of really novel ideas ahead of regulations, and especially in the U.S. market. I think in Europe, oftentimes technologies get to the road a little quicker than they do in the U.S. But I think some of those things you mentioned will ultimately bear fruit here too.
Yeah. No, I saw the Audi system, and it was pretty amazing that it would literally like shut off on one side and no glare at all to oncoming traffic. And I looked at that and I talked to the Audi people. And I said, how soon are we going to see that? And they're like, as soon as the United States lets us. So it was a bit of a problem. And kind of to circle back to this a little bit, like you said, this is the time of year, the
It,
days are shorter, the shortest days coming up. People still are, if you haven't been out on the road lately, go out. A lot more people are out on the road, even though COVID is where it is. People are driving at, just, if this wasn't COVID, we'd be driving to work in the dark, we'd be driving home in the dark. And it's important to have good lighting to be able to see where you're going, but also good lighting that doesn't blind oncoming drivers.
Absolutely. And the whole idea of, we tend to think of three P's, the proactive, so if you have it, if you don't remember when you last changed them, now would be a good time. We haven't really had heavy weather yet in the
Yep.
Northeast. I mean, we've had some rain, but we haven't had the, 2 foot uh, snowfall. Now would be a good time to do it. When you do it, replace them in pairs. I think
Absolutely.
sometimes people feel like we're just trying to sell them 2 bulbs instead of one, but they both have the same burn history. And these are very tightly toleranced to high quality products. So if one's dead, the other one is not that far behind. So, you wouldn't replace just one wiper for the same reason. You don't replace just one tire. You often replace 2 or 4, depending on whether it's all wheel drive or not. And then the other one is premium or performance. Oh, okay, I could put the OEM bulb in, and there's nothing wrong with that. but there's a lot of options there for having an even better driving experience than you had when you drove it off the parking lot when you first purchased it.
So bottom line, headlights and lighting in general, there's safety products of the vehicle, there's safety technology in the vehicle, and they're not designed to last forever. They have a pretty robust life, but they're not designed to last forever, and
Absolutely.
they require some maintenance.
Yes, and relatively easy to do still. I mean, granted, there are some vehicles out there where you have to be Houdini and come up in through crazy angles to get to them, but for the most part, replacing a bulb is a relatively easy endeavor for a person that's comfortable doing, low end DIY stuff around their house.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Hey, Greg, I want to thank you for taking some time out of your day and joining us on AAA Car Conversations. And again, if people want to get more information about lighting, they go to where on the web?
They go to Sylvania automotive.com.
Greg, thanks.
And if you
And
don't,
oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, if you don't remember that, Sylvania Automotive, just Google Sylvania Automotive and you'll see us right on the first couple search results.
Perfect. Hey, thank you for taking some time, and be well and stay safe.
Thank you very much. A pleasure to be on your show.